one of the questions that comes up regularly from you guys when you were polled about sort of questions that you had was, how does one begin? How does one start this act of moving into a professional career after these years of training that you've done and all that you've experienced? And I'm wondering if you guys could sort of just, first of all, talk about sort of the length of what you consider the length of your professional career. And then to talk about the moment where the thing that is driving your practice right now, when that kind of dropped for you. When was it right at the beginning? Marie-Josée sort of indicated that her interest in visual arts was a very early discovery. But when at what moment did that kind of clarity or that settling in around what your practice is about, when did that happen in that trajectory of your career to date? Anybody? Sure.
Anyone want to go first? Oh, okay. I would say I've been producing professional work for about the last 10 years. And I come into the work from a lot of different viewpoints or different ways of approaching it, all dance-based entry points, but I often work with traditional Indian dancers, and I work a lot with aerialists, and I work with contemporary dancers. So early in my career, I was really interested in taking these languages that I had learned and working with dancers to sort of see if I could teach that, integrate that, which I wasn't super satisfied with because I felt like I was always in a role of teaching instead of creating, which wasn't what I wanted to do. So what really dropped in for me probably recently is that I am just interested in entry points. And I think that now looking at things as just entry points into new discussions made my work a lot easier, whether I'm working with a traditionally circus-trained person in the same piece as a traditional Indian dancer. I just shifted the discussion, which was that was really big for me. And in terms of, what was the other part of the question, Michael?
When you said that you sort of feel that your professional career has been about 10 years long, when from the moment you, sort of your professional training and that moment where you began to think of yourself as a professional artist, how long was that period for you?
Well, on a really fundamental level, when I stopped being a bartender part-time, that was pretty important. Yeah, and now you have to be really good to be a bartender in Toronto. It's like a whole profession in and of itself. You have to like grow bitters and stuff. I wouldn't even make it there anymore. I don't know. I tend to think of professionalism in terms of a rigorous artistic practice, which I've always had, which is a value. Indian dance has a value called riaz, which means practice. And because a lot of it is solo-based, it's like shame if you're not in the studio 2 hours a day working on your stuff, which is a little bit different. Here, it's shame if you're not in class or in a studio or work, but so to me, professionalism is rooted in a really, really rigorous artistic practice. And I mean, in the last 6 years, it's become economically viable as, a support system, which really to me is just about time, right? The only thing I've learned is that you get better when you have more time to do your stuff, including failing, right? So failure is really important. It's really important to try things and have them not work. And that gets negated, I think, in our discussion because the opportunities are less and the funding is less. So there's less opportunity to fail, which makes you really good in the long run. So that dropped in maybe 3-4 years ago as well. Yeah.
And JoDee, your practice now currently with your research is, I would think among the three of you, is quite different from where you started as a dance artist. When did that thing drop for you? And how long have you been sort of considering yourself professional, and what do you mean by that for you?
For me, I mean, the discovery of breaking was still, like, that was the catalyst for me, I think, for everything that's happened after. And I did my BFA at Concordia and contemporary dance, And immediately after I graduated, I started breakdancing because I never wanted to see contemporary dance ever again. It's just oversaturated, right? You get very saturated in university in a good way, and just needed to do something really physical, really musical. It was really exciting, and I met a bunch of girls that were doing the same thing, and we all just started sort of doing it together, and it was awesome. And that energy between us really sustained us for a long time creatively. And I think if I hadn't met that group of girls at that time and started breaking, my life would be very, very different. But I'm really glad that it went that way. So sometimes you never know, right? I'll just say it, like sometimes you never know what's gonna happen. And then when it does, you know it's the right thing, and you just let that take you. And that took me for a long time. I mean, we started performing very soon. Like, I graduated in '99, my bachelor's, and we started in 2000. I also got into a little dance company at that time, so I started performing with them. I got my Pilates certification and started teaching, and sort of have maintained that all the way through. But I was pretty lucky to sort of dive into dancing really soon. And then we just were very hungry for opportunities. You know, we were training a lot. We were breakdancing. What fortunately for us was also very commercially, I mean, fortunate or unfortunate, commercially viable. So we did a lot of commercial gigs, corporate gigs, you know, that paid really well. And then we could fund our art habit, as we'd put it, you know, go do other things and then be able to have money to make the creative work that we wanted to make. And that was really fusion work. Whenever we put stuff on stage, it was breakdance. And for us, the meeting place of those two styles was really the interesting place to put on stage. Because breakdancing as itself, it doesn't need to be on stage. It's got its own place, you know, that it's home. So when we put it on stage, we wanted to talk about why it's there, what's interesting to us with that discussion between styles, discussion as us as women in that style, which is a very male-dominated style, especially 13 years ago when I started. And yeah, I mean that was just a long, whole, beautiful, crazy time, and I would say so for 13 years. I feel that I've been professional because I've been living my life as that. That's been my income. I opened a dance studio that taught urban dances. Had that for 7 years, and when that ended, I started my master's, or that was a sort of a flip. That was just kind of the natural time in my life to make that happen. But breaking has been the through line through all of that, really. Yeah, oh, and if you stay for the lunch, fusion practices, that's what I mean, is if you're interested in mixing sort of different styles together, like there's we can discuss that.
Both JoDee and Marie-Josée will be here for the networking lunch. Unfortunately, Brandy won't be able to be with us, but these guys will be here, so you can also speak to them a little bit more later. So Marie-Josée, for you, that moment when what you consider your practice now, when did that drop for you, and how long have you been practicing?
Too long. Let's say over 30 years. I don't even want to give the exact number. I don't think there was a particular moment where it dropped, because it was, I think, a series. When I came to dance quite late, and the ecology of dance in my days was quite different than it is now. I started in Montreal, and basically there were 5 dance companies. There was not the independent scene or the company scene that is now. It was starting to happen when I left and I came here. I was a student at the school that was just starting, and the small company that was just starting. Everything was just starting, and so I studied. That school was at Pointe-Pieds-Nus, and it offered ballet. We had 3 technique classes a day. We had ballet, all the types of contemporary dance. We had rhythm. It was based on the school of Mudra, which was Béjar School in Belgium, which is now Parts, and that's a whole other story. But the training was very comprehensive. We worked with Gilles Maheu, who later became one of really great theater director and opera director. So I had the opportunity to work with artists that were actually in the midst of their career. And so I was already exposed to that. So subconsciously, all of this information was in me. And I joined the company almost before I knew how to dance. So basically, I was on stage, and we were touring Europe before I actually had a chance to train properly, because I was just trying to catch up, and everybody in the company was quite a bit older than me. So it was a lot of I had to work very, very hard to stay in the field, and so through the company, the works that we were doing were also quite theatrical, and there was original music. Mm-hmm. So I think also that influence. And when I moved here, I worked for a lot of different choreographers, and because I was always interested in so many things, which is sometimes a problem. It's a good problem, but it becomes, I was always interested in different forms. There's not maybe one moment where I decided this is what I'm going to do. Is what happened is through people that I met and I work with. So I might have worked just like the neighbor wanted me to perform at the opening. I would be involved in a production with composers and singers, and they'd say, "Oh, I'm doing this show. I would like you to work with me." And this is how, probably 12 years ago, I started getting really involved in opera, because I also have voice training that was part of the school way back. So it's more through working, through opportunities of working and people that I've worked with, that it kind of creates its own path. And it's very sinewy and sometimes confusing, because you try to set yourself priorities, try to focus on one thing, but I'm constantly pulled towards, basically, as Michael was saying, Michael Caldwell, your curiosity, or you really have to go where you feel that you're really interested and really feel good about, that it really motivates you. So I think that's the main thing, that how I ended up where I am now.